with Discord. Okay, so basically, there's been a lot of good work done here, especially from Eugene, and we've discovered a lot of like good stuff. And before even going to Discord, this is kind of where things are like really living now. I don't know if people have seen this, but this is where the NEP 141 and the metadata and storage standard are implemented as like a library inside near SDK-RS. So people can simply like say, hey, I want to use a fungible token in my contract, and it'll just work like that. Of course, they can add custom methods if they want, but this is like where this is kind of all landed. This next page here is updates to some Nomicon. So this is like the spec. So we are kind of overwriting the old fungible token standard, and we have like the 3 items that I've added here. And thanks for all the feedback on this. We have the core standard, the metadata, and the storage. I think we will want to focus on like the storage at some point in this, because there is this issue of like, what is register versus unregister account? It could be argued that for fungible tokens, it's so simple that you could just have it inside of the storage standard, but we may want to discuss that later. So back to kind of the points over in Discord. How do we feel about just going through these kind of point by point? Or do people want to open up with anything else? Any like burning thoughts before we do that?
No, let's just walk through it.
Cool.
Mostly.
Okay, so in like one of the coolest things that's coming out of this entire standard is FT transfer call. Like this is like really the meat and potatoes. This is where we can actually do a lot of interesting stuff in one transaction. In there, you attach a message param, and right now it's a string. And so my question here was like, should we have a convention to this? Like, part of me, I think we all have agreed that like we shouldn't enforce any sort of like convention, like, oh, it should always be JSON. It should always say like, I am going to transfer and call. Here's the method. Here's the parameters, just like I have here. I'm not necessarily for that, but when it comes to like explaining to people how this works exactly, like in the spec over here, it would be nice if we had like something that was like, like here in the spec, I just have like the method name, right? That doesn't seem super good. So should it be like in JSON base64 encoded, and then like it's up to you people to figure out like what you want to do with it, or should we have no convention? I think we could start with like that topic and opinions on that.
Yeah, I think consensus so far is we do not have a standard, but maybe we can give guidance. At the same time, there was arguments in the past that we can use Borsch for this message. So like if we use base 64 encoded Borsch, which will not follow any consensus here. So I think the main standard shouldn't mention what's inside the message, just give an example like what can be inside the message.
Okay. So like, I guess like, would you change what I have here? Like, or, how do we do we just say it's pretty free form, and then like have an example that's better than just a string saying invest? Because this isn't great. This is probably really bad, but I'm hoping to like provide a better example.
Well, we can expand on that, right? Provide, just what Eugene described. It could be anything. If it's an object that you want to encode, then you have to base 64 encode it.
Okay.
Right? If it's Borsch or.
So let me give you like what's the intention here. Usually the intention here is something that there is some action related to that. So let's say I'm transferring from an exchange and want to do a payment or whatever. It's from my exchange account, or I want to do a payment for some service on a smart contract. Then here, right, I will just give, let's say, the order number or something like that.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing with Robert. So what is the action on this message? It is probably to show somewhere in some kind of UI this. Yeah, because what's the reason for having this thing on chain? Yeah,
No.
probably
I
for
mean,
some other.
No.
well, no, that message is meant to tell the contracts. It could be for display, but right, that is meant for the contract to process. It's almost like making a contract function call. So it's almost it's like invoking, it's like passing a message, right, to the contract that it maps to some API. It could potentially map to an API.
Yeah, so
yeah, the example here I can explain is, let's say on left side you have DAI contract, on the right side you have Uniswap. So when you call Uniswap from DAI using FT transfer call, so you transfer, let's say 100 DAI to Uniswap, you need to indicate why. And this is the field that you put. So you put in a message something like swap
to this token.
yeah, to near at this price. So you define a slippage straight in the message. So for example, you say, hey, I want to only like 2% slippage at the current price of that. So the minimum price is blah. This is how much I want to get for my DAI tokens. Or you can define a different limit, like saying, oh, I want to so much near, and this is how much DAI I have. And if you cannot fulfill it, like reject this message. Return me the rest.
Yeah, I think one of the use cases, I think Eugene described it very well one time in one of the posts, is think of the transfer call as a way to call a function on the contract and be able to attach the token, just like we attach near to a native, calling a contract directly. So that message is a way to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, then probably we should not impose any specific structure of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, just dropping in. I also agree that we'll probably naturally see a sort of standard pop up for how messages are parsed on the receiver side, but I don't think we can impose one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're actually all on the same page here then. So I think we can just probably move on from this one.
So that does it mean that like we are finalizing this? So this is final.
It's already finalized.
Okay.
Yeah. No
Good.
changes.
I think maybe, okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just in the effort of like any sort of like casting or anything that will cost one or greater CPU cycles, can we remove that? And so I was thinking, like, since the FT resolve transfer is always contract to contract, I don't think we need to say we need to cast it to like, JSON compatible. But I think there are arguments against that. Again, this is just like not a huge deal, but does anyone have like strong opinions on keeping it uppercase U128?
The argument is that assembly script might have issues parsing lowercase U128, I believe, right? Or at least it used to be.
Okay.
The case.
All right. Well, then that settles it. All right.
One question here. So it is not connected with this point, but it's connected with the bridge itself. Yeah. Because so for those of you who don't know me, so I'm responsible for the bridge development. One of the problems with that I see with the usage of U128 is that in Ethereum, if we are bridging Ethereum tokens and we are bridging them as fungible tokens on Near, they have different in Ethereum they have U256 as amounts or like as values that are used there. So how do you think we should tackle this? What will happen? So because there will be an overflow in case the amounts that are used for sending are exceeding U128.
Can you check on a bridge contract when you lock the tokens on Ethereum side that there are no fractions that can't be represented on near, if I understood the question correctly, so that the amount is always something we can port over?
I think for 99.9% of all of the tokens, the only thing that would need to be ported over, like as long as the total supply is less than 128 bytes, which I think is the case for 99.99% of all of the tokens on Ethereum, I think we're good.
Okay, so to check the total supply, but at the moment of porting, the total supply can change. Yeah, so if we're porting some additional thing, but yeah, we are.
What would happen today if you pass
there is just an ordinary cast. So the amount is submitted as is, and there is a cast that happens there. So it's an unsafe point.
Yeah, but will it fail on the near side, or will it?
I'm not
overflow?
sure how this casting is working. I don't think that
I mean,
we have a
it
test for
should
this.
it should fail.
I think we need to check for overflow, and if we are not checking for overflow at the moment, that it will probably not fail. So in general, in Rust, integer conversions don't check for overflow even when arithmetic operations do. So we should be careful with that, but we probably should just check it on Ethereum side. So it's if we already will be sending 128-bit values across the bridge, we should just check it on Ethereum side that they actually fit. And on the near side, we should check when there are arithmetic operations, like when someone transfers tokens, so the amounts are added. We also should check that there is no overflow, and if there is, just reject this, undo the separation to prevent any loss.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that's a good solution. Let's just keep this limit here, and I believe it's going to be okay. Mika, thanks for the idea.
No problem.
Cool. Another one that's interesting. I know I want to leave some room for talking about metadata, but we're moving fast, so we can spend time on this too. So there's the idea of having like a storage standard that's going to apply to many different contracts, because a lot of the time, as a just sort of refresher, it's like we need users to basically pay for their storage, or else someone to pay for their storage, so that someone can't just bloat a contract by adding tons of key values, and then suddenly the contract itself gets all the near eaten up in storage costs, and then it's possibly bricked. And so obviously we want to avoid that. What is the best way to avoid this? And thanks, Jasper, for all the conversations that we had. I think your implementation with Flux informed a lot about how basically storage can work. So we were talking about two different things, which is like the storage standard, which is going to apply to a bunch of different stuff, and then account registration broadly, which is like a user wants to use a smart contract. They want to say, hey, I would like to register, and this will have some sort of like song and dance with storage, but we had those as two separate ideas. So one thing that I think has been, people have different opinions on here is, in this implementation, and what I'm showing on my screen is, again, the library version of this standard that we're talking about today. And in the implementation of storage deposit, which is on the storage standard, not on the account registration, unregistration standard, we are kind of doing a registration sort of workflow here. This makes a lot of sense to me, because a fungible token, the way that we have it right now, is just so simple that it's like a person only needs a key value pair for themselves. They don't need anything more than that. The old way, like ERC20 kind of way, is like, oh, you may have multiple allowances and an escrow system, so you may want to leave extra room in storage for you to add and add extra allowances if you think that you're going to. That doesn't even apply here at all. So
Well, I disagree.
okay.
Depends on your contract, right? Depends on how what does the fungible token represent? The case you're describing is a prefabricated, like one generated from a factory that your standard template. But if your fungible token has different implementation, that's not true. Like for example, for the stake contract, it's not true at all. That's
But
like
maybe
that,
this
it's
is
not.
But maybe this means that this like advanced storage handling should be outside. I mean, if you're a specific token, then handle the specific storage problems outside the standard itself.
Okay.
No, I think the storage. I think what Mike. I mean, it should create. It should, when the initial deposit should register the account with the contract. I think that what was the difference of opinion was on the withdraw, right? Should the withdraw unregister the account? That I disagree with. Because in order to deposit, you have to have an account, right? So that, I think that is okay, but when you withdraw, you by definition, the standard says you can only withdraw your available balance, right? Once you make that initial deposit, you cannot withdraw your full storage balance, right? Your minimum balance has to be retained. If only way to close your account, it's just outside the scope of this. You need, where we talked about that AR unregister function, right? An unregister function to handle that business logic. I mean, I think that's where the difference, where there's some open question.
Right. So
Right.
I can comment on this implementation. This implementation is saying that your available balance will be same as a total for this implementation only if you have zero balance. So basically it's saying if you have zero balance, we assume you can withdraw the storage that will close the account. But if you have a positive balance, then you cannot close the account using storage withdraw. So this is the implementation here, and
Which
is not ideal, but at the same time, it's not as you cannot break a logic of the token this way.
for this token or a vanilla
fungible token implementation,
fungible token,
with fixed size.
Yeah, it's just that according to the standard, the way the standard is defined, on the withdraw, I should only be allowed to withdraw the available balance. So this is adding some additional business logic specific to fungible token.
Right, but yeah,
right.
And
I mean, that's the only point. That's the only point that I want to make, just so that people will be, if we want to call that out for the fungible token, the storage, you have to document this for the fungible token, right? We can't say that on the generic storage standard, because this is really it's for the fungible token that storage withdraw. For a vanilla token, that's not true for all fungible tokens, but that's where it gets tricky, right? Because not all fungible tokens will work that way.
I agree with that, and I think that an action item then is like, so right now we're looking at the storage standard. This is in the pull request, where I'm showing an example, and this is probably not a good example to show, where I say, hey, we're doing storage deposit, and the result is this, which is only really applies for fungible tokens. So perhaps we need to concoct a better example just for the storage standard in the spec. Do you think that it kind of addresses this, and we are plus like
Well, the available balance that applies to a vanilla. If you apply that logic, that applies to a vanilla fungible token, created from, well, you have knowledge of how that fungible token, works, how it's designed.
Yeah,
One
maybe we
second,
should add
I got
a
a dog out.
custom section here for the fungible token.
okay.
Yeah. Wouldn't it also be possible to create a different, more generic implementation of storage for the fungible token? Just because it's like we can just go with one example, where maybe the front end decides how much storage a user is actually going to deposit.
So the problem, so generic fungible token implementation, which is like follows the standard slightly different without like making it available, and allow like deposit flexible amounts. That will require an extra field on a contract to store this amount and store the used bytes per account. So that will be like higher deposit per fungible token.
Got it.
So it does.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the fund, we stick to the standard, and for the fungible token, if you want to close it out, you close it out with this. We haven't finalized it, but this registration standard that has an unregistered function, and that's clean, and it'll work across. It's standard across all fungible tokens.
So do we want to? Well, yeah, that was the question. Do we want to actually include this standard into the fungible token?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I thought that was the
core.
initial. I thought that was the initial plan, but I think it got lost in between the discussions and the meetings. Is that we would include the basic
AR register.
register and unregister. Even though register and storage deposit overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I definitely. Whoops. Robert's getting readmitted. I definitely like want to make this available as possible for like Bridge especially, but like I also think that like let's just do it. Let's just add the AR register, AR unregister. Like it will really provide a good example to other people, and it feels like we would have to explain like little nuances with how this implementation is. So yeah, I mean, I vote let's do that. Let's add it to the standard. I'll add it to the spec. Do others agree?
I mean, it does affect like stake token, right? Or like how it's gonna work. So if you don't have vanilla,
having a registration and withdraw works just fine. I don't see an issue. Yeah, because if you have a separate unregister and a separate registration standard and a separate storage standard, I can't think of where it wouldn't work for any fungible token.
okay, so to summarize this, basically, let's look first at vanilla token. You have AR register that exactly the same interface as storage deposit.
Yeah.
That basically
storage deposit
to create a basic
yeah
token, and then it returns you. Maybe it doesn't panic or something like this, right? So if account already exists,
follow the link.
Yeah, what is?
If you click
And
on
we
the link
should
on
probably
the comment,
and we should probably have that is registered function as a might as well Have it is registered.
It's registered. Sure. Do we need registration fee as well? It's kind of like a storage minimum balance.
If we do, then we get rid of the storage minimum balance.
But storage minimum balance is not.
I don't know. Those are
generic.
two different. Yeah, it's two. Yeah. Registration fee. Do we need that?
So I wonder if then, if we go with this standard, we can just not have storage manager enforced on fungible token. So we say the storage manager is not required for fungible token vanilla, and we go with account registrar. But let's say we're talking about
Yeah, I think
standard-
that storage standard was for Flux's use case, because you might need to
Yeah.
add additional.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that storage standard is not required for fungible token, but like for Flux's use case.
I think
yeah,
it's very
yeah.
helpful standard
Oh
like,
yeah.
for the
yeah,
variable size applications, but for fixed size,
yeah.
well, like for
Yep.
fungible token, we will go with potential account registrar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah. For vanilla, this fits the bill. Yeah.
I'm with you here. One additional thing from the practical usage of this trait or this standard. As far as I understand, like a pretty dumb question. As far as I understand, the different accounts are going to, since we are putting them in the map, and we're literally using a string of an account ID, is going to consume different space. So we're going to pay
So-
for different. Well, we
Depends
need
how
to
it's
attach different.
implemented.
yeah, we implemented it for the fixed size. So we use the maximum length account and just charge everyone the same fee.
Okay, so you're just saying that it's 64, like 64 characters
Yes.
max, and that's it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted. So yeah, the question was maybe we need
Just
to.
just a side
for the-
question there, just real quick. Is it more efficient to hash it, or just to assume it's, or just use the string? It's a question for Eugene, because that's something
I just use a string because you can.
Is there
like,
any
iterate. You can like get the list of accounts.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
from state.
But do you see any
as
benefit
hashes.
of hashing it and storing it as a?
Yeah, if
or
you want to hash it, it's like slightly more like less bytes,
Uh,
but you lose the ability to like reverse lookup.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Sorry. I
Mhm.
just wanted to, while Eugene was here, I just wanted to pick his brain there for a quick question.
So to come back to AR registration standard, so it basically can be more permissive. And like one problem that we faced with storage deposit and for fungible token specific, that it would panic if you're trying to deposit more. And the reason for this, it just was simpler implementation. But what the use case there was like, let's say you are trying to enforce that the account is already registered. You will have to handle it on the front end. Like you will have to handle like, oh, does the account already exist or it doesn't exist? If it exists, then we should not send the storage deposit in the past, but registration, and should only do the deposit, for example, or minting. But if it doesn't exist, then we need to first send storage deposit and then send.
Well, if you have the registration API, you can check is registered. I mean, it's an extra,
yeah.
you know.
On the front end, you
Yeah.
can do this, but let's say there's some stuff that comes in between and you panic and it's a problem, right? If it's like it was registered in between the transaction ends, then you kind of like roll back entire thing.
I think this
I
is
don't know
like
if-
particularly pointed at the bridge too, right? So one of my thoughts that I still think is a good idea is like having, maybe this doesn't have to be in the standard, but like having some function that's like, basically, I'm gonna be giving you like 0.0125 near, just in case this person isn't registered, and like you can use this if they aren't registered, or else give it back to me.
So let's go back to the account registration NEP. So this API doesn't have to follow the storage standard. So in this case, we don't need to panic. We can actually return the funds here if it's already registered. So, and like return bool. That way you can do AR register all the time and attach a balance all the time, and then it will be refunded.
It's just not
do
convenient to sign so many transactions, isn't it?
Well, you can do a batch transaction, right? You can always do AR register first, and then you do
And what a
mint or
user
whatever.
will see, and what a user will see in front of him.
In the wallet, they will see a batch transaction, which is two actions that they sign in.
Yeah, well, still just an additional complication.
Yeah, as long as
why cannot we use? So isn't the AR is registered? Isn't it this a method that solves this problem? So the front end asks it, and if it sees that everything is good, then it's just not doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how we do it right now. Also with Repnir.
Okay. So we don't need to like handle this refunds or allow to deposit like more than a registration fee. So we'll panic on non-expected behavior. Like if the account is also this account register account ID should be optional, I think, because you can register your own account.
Okay. I'll make a note.
Yeah, my only concern is that we want to avoid a situation that we give the user like what would be equivalent of the 2 wallet pop-ups or 2 wallet confirmations, because that will confuse the user.
Well, if you cannot really send the fund from your account unless you like when you're not registered, you have zero balance. For this case, you would sign 2 different transactions. You will sign one on the token and second on the bridge potentially, or the bridge will like pay for you when you sign one transaction.
Could a front end decide to batch these transactions and send them to the wallet? Or can you only sign?
Yes. If you in one, if they go towards one contract, well, I think that's support multiple as well.
I think that this logic can be inside of the finish deposit methods on the near side. So this is still going to be a single transaction, which inside is checking whether a user has an account. Yeah, and this transaction can take some additional, like it should take some additional near attached to it in order to cover this, cover the creation of the account, and it is going to do the refund. I mean that seems an okay-ish solution.
Okay. So basically, the thing we need to update is update the fungible token main standard. Say instead of storage manager, it now requires account registration trait. I want to look first before we switch to metadata at a few corner use cases. So let's look at the else example of stake token. So he will have to implement two traits now, account register and as well as storage manager. Because he supports Fungible token API as well as he needs storage manager for potentially like multiple actions that you can have.
I don't need storage. I just need because it's a flat. It's the storage cost doesn't change.
I see. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So
yeah. Well, let's say you have an example where you actually have a dynamic storage.
Yeah, like Flux.
Well,
Flux,
they don't have their
that.
own token on the contract, so they don't need to
Oh,
do
okay.
account registration.
Yeah. Yeah, like for example, if I was supporting, say, more than one token in the contract.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this case, when you do account register, well, let's say you support a fungible token and something else, like non-fungible tokens. Account registration will cover a minimum cost that you need to register an account and storage balance field to remember it. And storage manager, if you call storage deposit first, then it will also be able to register an account. I think. So you can use either API, but storage withdrawal will not be able to unregister the account. I think we should enforce it that storage withdrawal is non-destructive action, and the most it can do is to just withdraw the available balance that is not. So we change this logic. We basically say you cannot remove your account even if the balance is 0. So your available balance in storage API will be 0. And as well as this logic will not work that Mike displays. Does it make sense? So the storage API becomes very safe method. So you can call it like anytime you want to reclaim some free near that you used for storage. Because in the future, the reason for this, I want to include the storage API into the wallet. I want you to be able to, when you sign up for the application, so when you go through the wallet to add an access key, I want at the same time for you to be able to add the minimum balance for the storage. So with one transaction, you cover both the storage and adding the access key. Now the wallet will also be able to display a dashboard of all contracts that you authorize that you have storage. So you can see where you have excessive storage deposit and can reclaim straight from the wallet without going to the app. So for example, you use Flax and like stake token and you have, well, not stake token, but you use some other contract that has extra storage allocated for your account. And you decided that you need this near, you can go in the wallet and claim from Flax. It will issue storage withdraw with none, and that will claim your storage from Flax back to the account. But it will never close or break the contract.
When you say the wallet, is this being planned for you talking near wallet or some
near
wallet? A near wallet? Cool.
Near wallet for now. Well, it's not planned, but it would be ideal API for now.
Yes.
Because you will avoid this kind of like second trip to the wallet to add storage.
Yep.
And we're talking like very small numbers usually because of like reduced storage amount. So it's like less than.
No, it'd be ideal for the near wallet to have full support for fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens.
That comes, I guess, too. Okay, so this is it. I think we can summarize this later into the standard and update and like include the account registration API.
Sounds good.
So let's talk about metadata.
Sounds good. Yeah, so let's see here, just as a reminder. Yeah, so the general idea is like, what do we store on chain in state storage, and what do we put in the like reference hash, or reference, I should say, rather. So metadata, this is how I have it currently. Again, this is not like super fixed, but this was my understanding of what we kind of agreed on going back and forth was, and now this is actually, we're talking about having this be something like spec instead of version, because it's not like semantic versioning or anything, but storing the name, symbol, reference, which is the URL to something that has like a JSON document describing this thing, either centralized or decentralized. And then the reference hash, meaning that JSON document hashed so that, you know, in case there's DNS poisoning or something weird happens, people can reference that. And then we have decimals. I think that name, symbol, and decimals were basically taken from ERC20. These are all optional: name, symbol, decimals. But I'm glad that, thank you for joining, Alex Shevchenko. Like, we are like, I think that there are some opinions like, let's just put a lot of stuff in state. Let's just put everything possibly into the reference URL. And so like, yeah, I'll open it up to, especially like Robert. I think you have some thoughts about this. I think Robert and Eugene maybe have the most opinions on this.
Also, Mika.
Yeah, I can say something. So my, can you hear me?
A little bit. It's a little bit breaking up.
You're breaking up.
I don't know. Yeah, I have like something going with the computer. In my opinion, it's just, I mean, the required piece has to be as minimum as possible and reflect what smart contract needs. What other smart contract needs. The smart contract or the smart contract doesn't need a symbol.
I don't think we can make this
So
out,
the
actually.
opt-in,
Yeah,
Sorry?
the sound.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Do you want to type in Discord real quick? And in the meantime,
Which, yeah, maybe try reconnecting.
Yeah. Okay. Can I comment on this? So from the bridge point of view, yeah. If you are talking about the bridge tokens, I think that we need to. Well, many tokens, many ERC20 tokens nowadays, they're saying they are putting in the contract's name, symbol, and decimals. Though it is optional, it is pretty natural for them to have this information there. And though this information is persistent to the Ethereum blockchain, it would be very convenient to have this info on Near blockchain. Just in order to be able, for example, so if we're just not having it there, then the front end, in order to get this information, because like Ethereum, like dApps that I used to work with Ethereum already have some front ends that are displaying this information. Yeah, so it would be a disaster for these front ends if they are starting to use Near. And they're querying some information from Near, and they are not able to get this information from Near, and they need to establish a separate connection to the Ethereum RPC to query this information from Ethereum or from any other link. Yeah. So from my point of view, it's pretty natural to have an ability to store name, symbol, and decimals inside of the metadata on chain.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, if in minimum you need to have decimals on chain, because I know from the experience that if you don't have decimals, some of the dexes really don't work because they calculate the trades incorrectly. So that's the like compulsory, and I think we can follow Ethereum and get a name and symbol, so even the crappy UI can display something. But most of the interesting data can go to the JSON file hosted somewhere else.
yeah.
So
support that idea
I
as well.
don't know why, for example, decimals needed for the smart contracts.
So mainly this is only for the view. So it is just for the way how you're displaying the information.
So that's why my argument was we either store all information that we need to display the token, like the minimum on chain, or in the reference document. So we say, well, if we don't need, for example, decimals in the contracts, then it can go into reference. Or we put both all of this name, symbol, decimals into the metadata. I personally lean into the put all of this into the contract because it makes it easier for the front end to do one call instead of first fetching the reference and then try to fetch the reference. And the reference fetching may be problematic if you don't use like middle layer. So like you fetch it from IPFS, it may take a while, and then your UI is like looks super weird because yes, you have the contract name but don't have the metadata if it's not cached.
Yeah,
So I
not
would
to mention the app will need to know the reference format. Is it an IP? There's nothing in there that tells me that's IPFS or what is that endpoint. What's the format? It's
that's
you have to know how to
another
parse
thing.
it.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to mention, that in case we are storing the reference and in case the storage is not persistent, which we are most probably unsure of, then we need to have a way how to update this reference. I don't know, like something like some server just quits the support of this link or something.
Right. Well, yeah,
so that's here is the problem. So it should be then updatable.
So finally, so I think name, symbol, and decimals are good to be straight on in a contract. Plus, I would also include icon URL here as an optional field. And the reason for this is UIs usually want to display an icon. And it wouldn't like make that much more expensive to store this icon, especially if it's a URL, if you want to. But at least then you don't need to go to the reference to fetch the icon.
Yeah.
But what about updates?
Also, my question is for near team. Let's say that we have we add two URLs. We need to have a human clickable link homepage basically, and then we have an icon. Let's say that it's total like a maximum of 100 bytes. Is it expensive or not? And I think it's probably not going to be that expensive.
Yeah, it's like one-time deployment, right? You
exactly.
You can hard code it in a contract, so it will like. Also, to comment on the cost of retrieving the metadata from the contract, the view call for the static method is extremely cheap. Like your RPC doesn't go through like a transaction, so it's just like it can be cached. Yeah, I don't see a problem with like retrieving it from chain. So including icon here, not URL, but just like similar to reference, just icon. So reference
optional.
Yeah, as optional. So optional string. I think the name should be just icon.
And for the icon, we need to be carefully to specify it. We have two problems here. One is the actual dimensions of the bitmap, or should we just force everybody to use SVG? And the other is more stylistic issues. So we can have wallets that have black on white, and we can have wallets that have white on black. So those are the use cases that we probably need to be tricky with the icon specification.
Yeah, I think we just can do recommendations for.
Yeah, and I can think here we can fall back. We have because we have a lot of projects that have the same problem. There's a lot of token registries, and there are a lot of other registries in the web, like company phone books and whatever, where you can upload the company logo. So we can find a good example and just tell that this is
Cool.
what we follow.
Also, 6 minutes left. I want to also comment on reference hash. So we decided it's SHA-256. I suggest we encode it as base 58. So it's similar how we use it for public keys. I added a handler into the near SDK Rust library that handles these hashes like in more natural way. But yeah, it's just base 64, similar like how we have public key hashes.
I think we shouldn't use base 58 in anything new. It's not good. If we wanted human readable, we can use base 64. Base 58 is not good. It's more complex and it's less widely used.
I mean, we use the same for like our ED 256, or like whatever, ED 255319.
I thought base 58, I mean, it's just as readable as base 64.
It is as readable, but it is computationally more complex, and it has some problems, like it has variable length, which can be unexpected sometimes.
Yeah, but for this hash, it's 32 bytes, so it's exact the size of our like base key, and
Yes,
our
but
tools
I
already
think
support this.
it's wrong. I mean, what the problem with base 64? It's supported like everywhere.
I don't see a problem.
I would have it as a binary, and then whatever front end we have can always translate it
So
to a hex.
the problem is
Also,
this is
binary
JSON.
is also good, but in JSON, where if we need text, I think base 64 is the best option.
Okay, yeah, I tend to agree. Like base 64 is what 40 years old, so it works everywhere.
Sorry to be late, but aren't we using base 58 everywhere?
We use it for...
We don't use it everywhere. In fact, if you look at, for example, at near RPC, it uses base 58 in some places and base 64 in others.
So we use base 58 for hashes and public key. So that's like a natural place, but this is not an RPC. This is endpoint out of the contract, so we can use base 64 if it's like convenient. I think on JavaScript side, base 64 is easier to parse, so let's go with base 64 because there's like a buffer. Base 58 needs to be handled separately, so let's use base 64 then.
Yeah, and should reference be optional? Reference and reference hash? Or is...
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, let's also give this spec a version. So once we finalize this, let's give it some spec version for this particular metadata.
One more comment. So in ERC20 standard, they don't say if you can update the metadata or not. Some tokens allow updating metadata, and it should be allowed. So we should make sure that there's an event or a way to tell wallets that the token name has changed. Main reason for this being that there have been trademark issues. For example, there was a token called Monaco that had to change their name to a crypto.com because of the trademark with the Monaco, the city. So it's easier to make sure that we can update the metadata instead of token issuer to need to do a token swap just to change the name.
Do we need a separate field to indicate that it was updated, or are we just gonna hash it on the front end?
I think it's if there's in Ethereum there would be an event. I don't know how
Okay.
far events are in near.
Yeah, let's
But
not.
as long
yeah.
as you can listen for something for updates.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the only field that you should never update is decimals. So I think we should enforce that decimals cannot be changed in the metadata once it's deployed. Like should not be changed. Okay. I think
Should we allow symbol to be changed? Shouldn't that be constant?
no, I think you can change
Symbol, you can change it.
Yeah, you
Because
can
there's,
change it because if you change your name, you probably are going to change your symbol as well.
Okay.
Cool. This has been a really productive meeting. Thanks everyone for coming. Yep.
Does it work now? Can you hear me,
Yeah.
guys?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
better. I was writing on the chat. I mean, I had. Anyway, in my opinion, the reference will be used by dApps. So the dApps will, many dApps, especially like wallets, exchanges, will use that reference to download the data. And we can like envision and put all the possible information which will emerge in the future into that metadata stored on chain. Meaning that, for example, a symbol, like what smart contract, what other smart contract will use a symbol or icon? None. Only dApps will use that information. And going with this perspective that the dApps will anyway download the reference, then I don't see much point storing an icon on chain, for example. Same as for symbol. And yes, it must be updatable because we will change, we will add more information. And think about it like this whole reference is like, what we have on the curated lists.
So are you arguing that we should remove all of the except for reference?
Yes, almost. I would keep decimals because decimals might be used for some computation. And
Yes,
so
but
on-chain must be, so on-chain.
Off-chain can disappear. Off-chain maybe it's not available.
So how about we say we go included on-chain, but reference is your source of truth. So like you can use information that is provided from the metadata, but ideally you should fetch reference, verify reference, and then display it or like update it if needed.
Yes, because the reference will contain more information, the dApps will ask for more. This has to be like kind of a dynamic. Yes, because the richer the dApp is, they will like to share or get more information.
From
Yeah, and I think like it's two-stage process. So you display the user something that you have some token there, so you need to name, and then you try to fetch the icon. And if the server, I assume most of the stuff will be on HTTPS because that's what the front end support at the moment. So if you can't fetch the reference, then you have something to show to the user.
Yeah. I mean, the only problem with the reference is that it's not standard. What's the standard? The format in there is not standard. So unless we define, because otherwise, if a dApp, how do you display? You have to know how to parse. We're back to square one. You have to know.
Yeah, so we need to define the reference standard as well.
Yes, so that can be a JSON document, and eventually it will be extendable, right? We will add more. I mean, the community, the ecosystem will just add more information there.
Yes, but
That's
right
good.
now we still need to like display something, so we need to.
Correct.
So should
We
we
keep
insert? Yeah.
the core metadata on chain.
Okay, let's actually. I still think that optional icon is beneficial here, And then if you don't want to
Yeah.
include it in your contract, you can just return null.
Yeah.
And it can be fetched from the reference once we finalize the reference spec format.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And the reference we said will be optional as well. I mean, maybe you don't have any off-chain metadata.
Well,
Right.
for stuff like breached tokens that are created from the factory, I'm not sure what's the reference going to be.
Yeah. So you want
Plus, you probably
to
cannot compute
make a note there,
hashing.
Mike, that's reference is optional.
Or like they may follow slightly different spec name. Like maybe it's going to be like breached spec or something like this. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good information. So if I'm bridging a token, I would like to provide a source. Yeah, so let's say Ethereum smart contract for that. Maybe who bridged it, who was the organization behind it. I don't know, like who is the maintainer. So again, like we can define even now what's the like minimum data in the reference. So instead of putting the icon here, we can just directly put it there, and that will evolve.
So
and the thing is that you know, it's okay to evolve. It's okay to extend it. What is more difficult is to remove things.
okay. I mean, icon being optional kind of speeds up your displaying until you fetch the reference, because reference fetching, if it's not through the middle layer, like some kind of cached CDN of like hash, it may be an issue. Like pull it.
Yeah. Just a stupid idea. This is what some of the other normal web systems do, not related to blockchain. You can also probably embed the icon within the reference, like you embed SVG files within the HTML, and that way you can save one external call.
Yeah. Love it.
But
Okay.
think about that. Maybe tokens can outlive the reference, the companies, the people who created them. So I think we have to keep some basic information on chain, because the reference, the server references can be there long time before the tokens are not used.
Right. And that's why we can like retrieve it by hash. So that's why we have this SHA-256 hash that uniquely identifies the reference in addition to URL. So there can be some like gatekeeping archival node that actually like can pull this information for you, even if the original URL is dead. So long as you can like query by hash, they will give you the reference for this hash. So it can be like some Explorer, wallet, or whatever endpoint. We are over time, but let's try to put this into the updated spec and then keep discussing it if there's like strong opinions about removing it. But I mostly agree with all points that like a reference is source of truth. The information metadata are for like quick displaying, like when you just fetched it before you pull the metadata. And then all of this is updatable except for decimal. Reference are optional, icon are optional, name symbol are not optional, but you may like just put empty string in a name if you don't want to. And base 64 for the reference hash. And spec, we need to come up with the name for this metadata. Maybe it's going to be like FT 1.0 or something like this. And that will be our first metadata that we will put. And then the way a frontend will evolve, like the frontend pulls this metadata, verifies the spec first. If the spec is something the frontend understands, then it displays it like by migrating to latest spec. and fill in the details. So we can evolve this metadata and still support the legacy tokens on the front end.
What does that what is that spec?
Spec
What's
is
that?
kind of a version of this specific
Of the
metadata
metadata?
standard. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the spec of this
That-
message. So if we
Okay.
like change it in the future by adding a field, removing a field, or doing something, we change the spec, and the parser, because it's JSON, it can just read this spec field and later parse it specific to the spec.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that was representing, you know, the spec for the fungible token, but you know, if we somehow in the future, I don't know, if we extend or change or fungible token
I think,
API,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting point. So maybe it's not only spec for the metadata, but the spec for entire token. And we just say,
That isn't the number 141. If we create another API, it will be, I don't know, 233.
I think reference should indicate what's contract supports, like what standards contract supports.
Or yeah, I mean that's the other place to put it. In the reference. Once we define the standard reference.
In the next quarter, we will look into like contract metadata, which is going to be generic metadata per contract that will expose all the public methods of the contract and all the API, and so that piece of the metadata probably will tell you which standard it supports and like all the extra information that needed, non-specific to the fungible token.
Yeah, I think Robert, you have a kind of a draft too about this, so that'll be fun to do. Yeah, but that will be next quarter. Cool. Are there last burning thoughts? I know we went over, but it was like totally worth going over.
No. It was a productive meeting.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, bye.
I thank you.
you.